Totally understand. I know. I can't believe we are already in May. Hey, Grant, welcome to the space.
Hi, how are you?
I am wonderful. Good to connect with you again. Happy May.
Okay, yeah, you too.
Thanks. Yes, we have to keep a good, relaxed vibe, have our energy great, especially when we do have so much going on. So, yeah, I thought I'd bring some nice, jazzy, calm, soothing, relaxing sounds to us. Welcome to the space, Brandon.
Hello, hello. I'm sorry, I'm not on mute.
So glad to have you joining us. All right, let's put that on pause. I don't want to miss anything. Awesome. So, I am too happy to see. Thank you. You all coming in. We're going to allow some other people to come into the space. We are already in May. Wow, we started this journey in February with an intro session just to garner and build relationship around interest in capacity building. And then in March, we launched this idea. We looked at frameworks, we looked at existing structures, and then to bring up to speed what we'll be talking about tonight after we go over our rules of decorum when we get started with our PowerPoint is we're going to be diving into what some of you have been doing in the meantime. When we left on March 11th, we were not scheduled to come back again until then. So it was really independent work or you doing what you were already doing, especially if you were already doing community engagement. It was your time to really see how it can be improved, enhanced by what you learned in the academy, as well as how your fellow leaders could grow here. So in that meantime, I was able to meet with some of you one-on-one and just really dive deep into how you all are doing in community, which is incredible, which brings me to being really excited about having one of your fellow community champions present tonight on some community engagement work she's been doing and begin a while back in the community on the ground. Want to check in. We're going to start our slide deck. I wanted to check and see if anybody was in the waiting room. I'll check for emails too. Did anyone have any challenges logging on? Everyone good? Didn't have to navigate? Awesome.
Everything was great.
Thank you. Awesome. So as we are switching over to our share screen, we've been working with you all. You all are the same consistent group, which I really appreciated and valued in doing this part of the work. But one thing that was asked of us in that meantime or in between time was good, it works. Was a moment to engage in some of the sessions that Amplify Consulting engaged in. So if you could just raise your hand and just let me know if you participated in any of those sessions that was led by Christine. She had some in the daytime, some in the evening, but they were talking about community engagement with the budget process and giving feedback. Were any of you able to participate in the March or April sessions here in this audience so far? Raise your hand if you had. I did. Awesome. Thank you. All right.
Coco. Sorry, my dog is barking. That's why I'm on mute.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
A Staffordshire Bull Terrier. I think it's really more pit bull than anything else. And he looks like Petey or the dog on Little Rascals, but he's raising hell right now. So I'm not sure what's going on outside. So
Oh, well, if you need to check your environment, please feel free to, for sure. We welcome friends in our space. We know that life happens, and whether we have are the caretaker of two-legged or four-legged beings, we certainly understand when need arises. Thanks, Grant, for lifting it up and letting me know as well that you were able to participate. That is pretty cool. All right, let's get to the rules of decorum. So I have my window open. You may hear the kids in the background. Okay, got everything. Awesome. So I may have to pause while we're communicating just in case someone else comes in and may be stuck or lost in the waiting room. But welcome to our Community of Champions Community Engagement Academy. And pretty much these last two dates are here for us to hear how things are going. Today is our May 6th. Our next one is May 13th. So we are totally about to be done. With this portion of the academy, but there's going to be several opportunities for us to continue engagement in some capacity and talk about lifting up the pipeline. And for those that were not able to join us tonight, just like the other sessions, this session will be recorded and reserved as a resource for the City of Asheville community. So since our last meeting, we had an opportunity to listen to the community, listen to our academy participants, and look at a way that we can meaningfully engage in a helpful way without bringing harm. And so the Equity Focused Budget Engagement and Community Engagement Academy, in partnership with the City of Asheville, co-designed the rules of decorum. It says here, as you've seen, if you participated, please read ahead. If you participated in any of the budget sessions, you received a copy of this. I'm getting messages as we're going, so please don't delay. Mr. Bernard is having some challenges getting in, so let me make sure that he can have access. Okay, let's see if everyone can get in now. Hey, Rob, welcome to the space. So with this agreement, we were looking to create these rules of decorum so we can have a safe and healthy growing space among us. And this group will, of course, be respectful. I am Shemeka Ebony of Shemeka Ebony Consulting. And any questions you have about our session tonight, as it states here, please check in the chat area directed towards me. We will not be engaging in any breakout sessions tonight. And then there'll only be one time when I guess you could lift up questions or amplify questions specifically for a presenter, and that's our guest presenter that we'll have tonight. What you also see here is that we refrain from personal attacks and or threats directed towards city staff, the consultants, other attendees, members of the public. Also here, we want to lift up the attendees shall be civil and courteous in their language. Please no insults or profanity, use of vulgar language or gestures, no disrespectful comments or questions or jeering from the audience. Likewise, we will not address or respond to other members in the session. We're going to be respectful, of course, but we're just going through this so that everyone understands how we're showing up in the space today. The consultants or city staff have the authority to enforce the rules of decorum as follows. Failure to obey these rules will result in initial warning to discontinue the behavior. Also, the next violation by an attendee will result in the attendee being muted in the meeting. And then the next thing that will happen, hopefully, and I'm sure based on this group, we will not have any of those challenges tonight. Individuals will continue to engage in egregious or repeated violations will be removed from the meeting. Does anyone have any questions so far? I'll press pause. If you could either use the raise hand feature, or you could put your question in chat if you have a question about the rules of decorum. Okay. Let me, some people may be on the Google Meet link, so please excuse me, I apologize. Thanks for that update. Please read over these if this is your first time viewing them, because again, we want to make sure that everyone is aware how we're going to be operating and share space together based on the rules of decorum. Let me make sure. Okay, hopefully Mr. Bernard can get over here. Let's see, I think we should have fixed it now. Okay. That should take care of it. Okay. So this is just a slight reminder. If you have follow-up questions, you want to share any emails to myself about today's meeting, probably want to give me a few days before the recording is available after editing. And then know that other attendees must, of course, follow the rules regarding excessive, inappropriate, or threatening messages. Even if you're sending an email, these rules of decorum do follow over to there. The rules of decorum outlined for these sessions are provided to ensure that all sessions are welcoming to all participants and creates a respectful and safe space atmosphere where all feedback is honored. So I want to do a quick check-in before we move on. Is everyone in agreement with what we've shared? Do you have questions, anything like that that you want to lift up before we continue about our rules of decorum? Awesome. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to see your faces tonight in the space. And again, welcome. We're just beginning our session. This is our next to last session. It's been a while since we had an opportunity to meet up and connect. And tonight is really all about having that check-in, seeing how we're all doing, and seeing how we can support one another. For those of you that participated in the budget engagement with the sessions that Christine had had from Amplify Consulting, you heard quite a bit about community engagement and specifics of more so from theory to practice of what are some practical ways of enhancing or transforming how community engagement is currently handled in partnership with the budget department and the city. So if you didn't get a chance to connect with that in during the March round or give feedback during the April round, those results will be prepared collectively and probably lifted up in the city manager's report. So if you give them a while or if you attend those meetings regularly, you'll be able to share in that capacity and seeing that presented or seeing the recording after it's presented on the YouTube station. Does anyone have any questions before we continue? Welcome to the space. I see Margaret and Ty have joined us, and Kelsey, thank you so much for being here. Awesome. We're going to go back into share screen. Awesome. So here I am again here as a facilitator. Our overall academy goals, we had a big vision that we were consistent in showing different ways for how this could show up. And we were really intentional during this academy to really center our awareness, knowledge, understanding, and identifying frameworks to really look at how we can understand and co-design community engagement strategies centering people with lived experience expertise, which many of you were able to identify as yourselves here in this group. Something that we're going to do tonight, as we have spent a lot of time talking about frameworks and talking about how to reimagine community engagement, we'll be talking about some next steps, like for those that are already doing the work, for the community teams that formed and are presenting over the next two sessions. We are so happy to have you all growing your capacity as a community champion and as a partner to the Academy. And we're going to be lifting up via Bright Spot some of the work that was done between March and May, because of course that was a huge gap of time in between us, and we're going to spend some time tonight just kind of doing that check-in. So we will have some time when we are looking for an opportunity to hear from you and to hear what your journey has been like and what you want to amplify. So when that time comes, I just ask that we are mindful to give each other turns to speak, and we'll use the raise hand feature and govern ourselves accordingly. One of the things that I will lift up too are community resources. So if those of you that are part of the session tonight are a community resource holder, convener, collector, if you have resources to share to this group that will be beneficial, we want to make sure that we give you some space to be able to share during our session tonight. Anyone have any questions? I'm gonna check, I have to check between two screens to make sure I can have access to see you all as you all are communicating with me. Okay, looks like we are good. Okay, so when we look specifically to what today's goals are going to be, we're going to look specifically into identify ways residents currently engage, as well as looking at how we can grow capacity and how we are looking to engage. Like, are there some ways that just need something to formulate or tweak, or may need a resource that's in the room that we can make those connections tonight and get you what you need to continue to grow your capacity beyond the Academy. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about sharing next steps and reflections just based on what the budget engagement process has been like, and opportunities for ways that you personally thought of, or the group of lived experience that you're connected to may have reflected upon, you know, how these areas can improve and have some solutions to offer. Then we want to give some space to that as a goal and objective for tonight. I want to lift this up again. We talked about this last time, but it's looking at existing ways to engage with the city of Asheville. So, what you have before you are the Communication and Public Engagement Department. This may be something you already are connected to, but there's alerts that you can sign up for that we can certainly make sure that you are engaged with that. If you need that link, then just put that in chat and we'll make sure you get a direct link to that so that you can join. That is giving you community updates along the way. So the next thing you have here is the City of Asheville Engagement Hub. This is on the public input platform and really amplifies this one, and the next one kind of gives you the overview of what this equity focused budget planning process has been like so far, as well as giving you an opportunity to kind of see what's coming up, what are some other opportunities to engage. So I wanted to make sure that you all had access to that. If you have not connected with that, then definitely amplify that you need those links in the chat and we'll get you that. So one of the things we closed out in our last session, we didn't get a chance back in March to kind of deep dive on this portion when we look at identifying equitable ways of being and doing engagement with the team. So there was a community champion challenge in which we challenged you all to create intergenerational teams that would address some of the common questions around community engagement and provide potential solutions to help navigate those barriers. So I like to see y'all's faces. So we're going to stop share and I'm going to check in because I want to make sure that we are meaningfully connecting while we're right here. I can send you the PowerPoint slide, but it's just something so important about us having this time to meaningful maximize what this looks like theory to practice. I've treated this academy as a train the trainer or leaders because I know you all are already doing brilliant and incredible work. So I want to take this time to do this check-in when we're looking at this aspect of identifying how we engage each other. I just want to do a check-in with us and see how do we meaningfully engage, aside from maybe if you get paid for engagement, just as a human being, how do you set intentions in relationship building with other groups of people or other individuals, whether they're people with lived experience or people that you're connected to in community. I will ask if you could give feedback, if you want to raise your hand or begin speaking so we can identify you if you raise your hand. And the floor is open. I see Dion and Margaret are unmuted. Did either of you want to share?
Sure, I don't have any. I'm sorry, go ahead, Margaret.
No, I would just say, how do you engage with other people? One is being, understand their mission statement and also make your presence known. You can verbally express it, but for them to have an event and to see you there, that speaks volumes.
Okay, so make your presence known. Okay, thank you for sharing that. That's good for sure.
I just wanted to say that one of the things that sometimes we don't often see happen on a regular basis is that when we're looking at engaging, particularly groups that may look different from us, taking an inventory of who shows up when we have community engagement sessions. Do we have representatives from other groups if we're honestly interested in learning more about one another? And we're talking about proximity here. If we have meetings on a regular basis and we're not seeing a diverse number of individuals from different backgrounds show up, then it means somewhere along the lines, we need to do a better job of engaging people so that we don't move forward and make decisions without input from everyone. So I'm just hoping that over the last few weeks that people have talked about engagement, but also are really looking at what we do to make sure that we are doing due diligence to make sure everyone's engaged and invited and feels the environment feels inclusive versus exclusive.
I love it. Thank you for lifting that up. Now, I know you were saying you didn't have much to say, but I think that was incredibly brilliant, all right there. So thank you for lifting that up. And you bring up a powerful point. Because I've been in these rooms asking these questions for years. And what I found along the way is sometimes it's easy for us to look at the 85% that we don't have. Like people ask you all the time, well, who's missing? And you may know one person that's missing or one person out of an identified group. But if the readiness isn't there for the group to have them, they're okay. They're better off not being there until you're ready. And that readiness could be in the form of removing jargon. That readiness could be in the form of, if it's a completely different language that they're more comfortable with, then how are we embracing multilingual presentations or engagement opportunities? And that may mean finding an ally or an asset in the community that could be in the form of an organization that can partner and provide those services. So Miss Margaret brought up a powerful point that I think amplifies that too. You got to, show up and be present and be available. And so if there's identified barriers that we remove, like if we're looking at someone who's differently able that can't come to this meeting because there's a physical barrier from them being able to successfully, it's on the 5th floor of a building or something like that, that accessibility may be a challenge or an issue, then we have to look at making sure that when we identify that absent person, also take that ownership to be a part of making that connection to get them in the room or to get us in the room, because we may know it, but that next step of seeing what can we do, we may not have all the power, but if we look at the 15% of the power that we do have, which we already expressed and illuminated because we can identify who else needs to be here, then I get to take my ownership in how I make it happen, or how can I support make it happen. And that shows that teamwork, that shows that commitment, because sometimes it gets into the habit of identifying who's missing, but no one wants to take that step to help. You are so right. These groups are missing, and we need someone that's connected, and that's kind of where the convening begins. So even as community leaders, as you begin to connect in community, and those doors open, that's why I always encourage, like, community leaders, if someone lets you in to become part of a team, then hold space for two. Like, keep an empty seat with you, keep that empty chair, and keep ready someone that you can invite that can share that with you, so that you can avoid being singled out or tokenized, of being the only one, and then not having the support you may need, or even coming into that situation with their readiness not being ready to give you shared power. So these are good. What are some other ways that we have identified through experience, that we just have learned how to meaningfully engage with people? Welcome, Mr. Bernard. I'm so happy to have you be able to join us.
Well, hello, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
Hey, you're right on time. It's starting. You're here and you are coming right on time.
I am late and I'm irritated. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, sir. So what we're talking about, we've just taken some time to kind of walk through our last sessions. We went over the rules of decorum. Mr. Bernard, have you had an opportunity to review the rules of decorum?
Every one of them.
Thank you. I want to yield that also to Ty, Margaret, and Kelsey. You all came in after the rules of decorum was read and reviewed. Have you all seen them? Just if you have not had a copy, just raise your hand and I'll make sure that we can get you brought up to speed so that we can share that governance. But if you participated in any of the budget process with Amplify Consulting, then you did get access to go over these rules of decorum. So what we're doing is having some open conversation around just the basics. Like as I shared, I really want to keep this academy on the train the trainer level. So we're talking about practical ways that we know how to meaningfully engage, or what works for us, so that we can share that as we're moving forward in our community work and what we're doing and what's working. Is there anyone else that would like to share? What are some ways to meaningfully engage that you've experienced or that you've seen to be a better practice?
I think that everybody else gave a lot of beautiful and wonderful insight. Only thing that I would add is focus on not taking up too much space as well.
Mm-hmm. That is good. I love that. Focus on not taking up too much space. Um, some people may very well be uncomfortable, uh, or if you take up a lot of space and people identify you as leaders, then you might get pushed out there a lot more often too, by the way. That does tend to happen. But certainly brilliant thoughts on how to honor those that are in community with us. So thank you for lifting that up. Anyone else want to give some feedback before we go back into our PowerPoint on meaningful ways to engage? Awesome. Okay. So we will go back to sharing our screen. So while we're here, I want to I need to send the link to Dee really quick. I see she sent me a message. So let me make sure she can connect. Because Dee is going to be our special guest tonight. So I want to make sure she can get in. Okay. Let's see if she should be able to get through. So I believe we go right into her section. Okay. So here we lifted up this as something that we were working with, and you all, some of you may have seen this come up. Let's see. Some of you may see this come up in your community engagement when you were working with Amplify Consulting. But one of the things we wanted to lift up in thinking about what we can do in the academy and how we could make these connections and bridge the gaps that may be happening between the city of Asheville and those of you that are leading engagement initiatives across the city and county lines already. So with engaging people with lived experience expertise, we really were looking at the co-designing and engagement strategies. What is really working? What's missing from community engagement? And what existing engagement practices could work better? So these were the prompts that were given to you all to think through and reflect and either build or form intergenerational teams, or asking this of your existing teams to kind of get feedback and reflection, especially from those community members that we identified that were still missing from the table. So here's some things that we lifted up, and I just want to spend some time here talking about them with you, or should I say listening, because these are some questions and prompts that are directed towards our community and maybe some of the community engagement work that you focused on in your time. So when we think about the existing ways of community engagement with the city, what are some existing ways that work or that are helpful that you all were able to identify or can identify now?
not many on that list. I guess one positive that I say here lately is they hired an individual to specifically do community outreach, like on the ground, Mr. Jeremy Lett.
Yeah.
And, I've been hearing a lot of places he's been going, and I've also met with him. And I think that's an important first step that the city is making, where they're attempting to meet people where they are instead of creating an event and like, well, if you don't come, you're just not going to get informed. So that's one thing that I see positives come out of.
Thank you for amplifying that. Yes, Jeremy was able, I think he was at our March session, and when we had an opportunity to talk briefly in one of the meetings, he was so happy to be engaged in community. And so really looking forward to connecting with the existing leaders. So it's good to hear from the community as well that he is following through and continuing that process out to meaningfully engage. Is there anything else that we want to lift up around positive things or good experiences around engagement? Any, this is working, this is good, that we want to lift up?
How are you doing?
Hi, Dee, welcome to the space.
I am so sorry. I have had some technical difficulties, as you can imagine. And I finally found the Zoom link. So it's just been running around and me trying to get on, but I do apologize.
All is well. You are right on time. We were just kind of doing some engagement conversation, just asking general questions about our group. So what I hear come across from comments is, I believe we need to look at outcomes. Does what we desire to take place require collaboration? If we're always upset or mad at each other, we need to figure out how to move through that in order for us to build trust to get things done. Passion is amazing. Hostility is not. Jeremy is a great connector. Yes, Rob said, great point, Ms. Greenlee. Absolutely. I thank you for amplifying that. There, I guess, has to be some steps taken along the journey. Sometimes people need to be heard. Maybe they have been silenced in rooms for so long, they have to have that space. So that's what that relationship building is, and building that trust is creating those circles of trust with relationship building and having those real conversations before you get to the business stuff. Because sometimes based on deadlines, we want to jump to that part very quickly, but we're not honoring the meaningful relationship building part. So it can't be transactional. Thank you for lifting that up. That's really powerful. I want to confirm, Dee, are you able to speak? Is your sound doing good? You connected all the way?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. I'm good.
Okay, well, without further ado, I'm gonna skip back over to screen share, because one of our next steps is giving some time to spotlight the incredible work that Ms. Williams has been doing in community for several years. And her project is really meaningfully tapping into what's possible. And I'm so honored and happy that she's given us some space tonight and some time to honor us with her learnings, her experience, and allow us to build with her. Okay, so whenever you want me to advance the slide, you just let me know. Next
All right.
slide, please.
Thank you so much, Shameka, and everyone. It's just a pleasure and an honor to be in your presence this evening. And so I just want to share one of the projects that we've got. I just wanted to mention too that the small company that I have, D. Williams and Company Incorporated, has been around and incorporated since 1999. And it basically has two arms. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, two divisions, if you will. One is a community projects arm, like we have here tonight, the project. And the reason why we call it that is because we have something of a social enterprise where we will take a community project that will benefit people, particularly African American or Black people in the community. We also collect data. That's another kind of a thing that we do. But basically what we'll do is take a project that is not funded by anybody and that we don't get paid for, and basically assemble a group of people who need help, train them to become their own best advocates, arm them with information, coupled with lived experience, and engage policymakers with the data and with our community, our people, to change hearts, to change minds, and to change budgets, because budgets are moral implements. They absolutely reflect how people value things. So that is the arm, one of the arms that we have that a lot of people don't know about. Let me just say that the other arm or division is an enterprise arm. And of course, just like any consulting firm or whatever, small business technical provider, you get paid for that. And of course, there's proprietary information and some exclusivity. Some of the projects that we've done, first of all, with our community projects arm, are things like written consent to search with the Asheville City Council, using data to change, to stop searches of Black people. We were the #1 place for stops of Black motorists by the Asheville Police Department in the entire state. Not a lot of people know that or knew that when we started collecting the data, but we did get a policy written to stop that, to stop those searches. Also, data that we collected to do ban the box for Asheville City and Buncombe County to get them both to pass ordinances. A lot of folks who are felons didn't have a chance, and it disproportionately affected the Black community and Black men and young men in particular. So what we did was to use our data to show harm and collateral damage to get the city to stop asking folks if they had felonies in the county as well, because statistics show us that more than 70% of those apps are thrown in the trash when that one question is asked. Also, the open data portal that the city has, we work with several other data purveyors like Code for Asheville to get that instituted, and the city now is on a mission to collect data. Also, we provided the work to retrofit the strategic partnership funds. That was last summer, I believe, with the Equity Office. We also, a long time ago, put together the language for the Minority Business Enterprise Plan for Asheville City and Buncombe County. And of course, tonight, we want to bring you participatory budgeting and explain it to you. So if I can have the next slide, please, Shameka. Thank you. Okay, so it's participatory budgeting. And if what we want to do is kind of give you a little background. May we have, yeah, thank you so much. It's a highly democratic process in which ordinary citizens decide upon and create budgets for projects which they want to see in their communities. It also involves children as young as 10 years old and some younger to participate in this deliberative and budgetary process. Many of the projects are capital projects or physical improvements, which everyone in the neighborhood has access to. And community groups, neighborhoods work with the city and county staff to decide upon projects and the budgetary amounts. Next slide, please. The other cities that already have participatory budgeting are Greensboro, North Carolina, and Durham, North Carolina. Next slide, please. Okay, what has been done to promote participatory budgeting in Asheville? This is what we did or engaged the city staff and other people in the community. The city manager and chief financial officer of the city of Asheville and the finance staff were introduced to the concept, and some of them had already visited it. I believe Jamie Matthews, who's executive assistant to the city manager, wrote her, I believe her MPA thesis on it. So several of them, including, I believe the then budget manager, who is now our CFO, he was in the meetings, and several people were. So we got a lot of support for those community-led meetings and the presentations that we made. We did pick out a test group, like a beta group. So what we did was went to the East End Valley Street Neighborhood Association. which is a pretty highly organized and sort of African-American led neighborhood. And what we did was use them as the beta group, brought them together with the CFO, other folks from the city manager's office, ordinary citizens from the community, and pretty much just gave them some briefing papers on participatory budgeting, let the citizens that we had trained get up and explain it. I don't think, when I usually design something, I try to put people out there, you know, from the community first and let them learn the stuff and just provide technical assistance. And then when it's time to run, we provide support. So they were out there front and center, and East End Valley Street was really excited about it. And the other citizens in the room were too. And so it kind of made the city staff really excited about it too. And they were whole hog into it. So if the city of Asheville decided to adopt it by resolution, city council, we would become only the third city in North Carolina to adopt the process. And then, of course, as y'all know, the pandemic happened. It sort of stopped all of our in-person meetings and so forth. And the process sort of lulled right there. Next slide, please, Shameka. Okay, so what are the next steps in making participatory budgeting a part of the city's budgetary process? And I go on to explain about the pre-pandemic. The city talked about actually bringing in some participatory budgeting consultants from Greensboro to actually bring them in to train not only the community and provide technical assistance, but also to provide the same kind of technical assistance to their staff. One of the things that I would say, and I would say to y'all too, Shameka, and your group and your consultancy, is I think the city probably needs some, to bring you guys in, to bring more people from the community in to engage them further in this process, because that's something that I don't think that was done adequately. I mean, as we use what resources we had, which were very meager, we saw where the same people were coming to the meetings, just like anything else. But the people who really needed to be in that room were not in that room. And that's just, well, we sort of agreed, we discussed it. And that was one of the other things, that we needed more community engagement. So that may be a point that you might want to follow up on, since the city staff and the manager and the mayor, you know, everybody was so gung-ho, but that's a big piece that needs to be brought out and needs to be addressed, because that's a critical piece right there. The city was going to use their power to convene community groups by opportunity zones locations, since the city's districts had, for district elections had not been decided. Now, as y'all may know, the opportunity zones contain Asheville neighborhoods which disproportionately lower income, more ethnic minority, and share and where there are high rates of unemployment. These are federally designated zones. These are not haphazard. There are 5 of them, and you'll see them, and they probably encompass most of the legacy so-called African-American or Black neighborhoods that are left in the city. And there are 5 of them, and I think we kind of list them so y'all can get familiar with them too. So Shameka, please, next slide. Okay, so I kind of lay them out. I didn't do a map, but we kind of know where these places are. Track 2, these are census tracts, by the way. Hillcrest Opportunity Zone, census tracts. That's a Hillcrest Apartments. Y'all know Stumptown, which is in that vicinity. Houston, Cortland, Hill Street. I grew up in, that area. They call it West End Cleveland now, I guess. That's the neighborhood association that has been formed around it. So they are a definitive neighborhood group, but this is where the legacy Black neighborhoods were when we were growing up. Track number 7, which is Choctaw Street, McDowell Street, and Biltmore Avenue. Let me just say that this census tract abuts Census Tract 9, and this was the site of, this Census Tract 7 and 9 were the sites of the largest urban renewal projects in the southeastern USA. Don't ever forget that. And also a big player is in that census tract, and that's HCA, the former Mission St. Joseph's Hospital, which they still are now, and they need to be engaged. If this ever comes about, this participatory project budgeting process, as a neighbor and an anchor employer. They're the largest employer in Western North Carolina. And they were willing to do some things. I don't know since they turned private, but they do have some community obligations. And so please keep that in mind. They are a neighbor in this tract. And Census Tract 9 is the only distressed census tract in Buncombe County. Census Tract 14 is the Emma community. I don't know if y'all know this, and this is now predominantly a Hispanic community that lives in a pretty sizable mobile home park, lives there now, and they're going about buying up the mobiles there. They have a program and all of that, and we worked with them some when we worked with the Isaac Coleman grant folks at Buncombe County. Let me just say that the legacy of this, and a lot of y'all aren't from here, the legacy of this Emma community and the land on which this Hispanic community sits is one in which an African-American man, if you go, and the family of this man hired us to do the research and handle all the bureaucratic stuff to put a plaque on the Asheville Police Department municipal building, because he was a master brick mason, and it was J.V. Miller. So Mr. Miller had a dairy farm. He was an entrepreneur, just absolutely. He owned all of that land at the time. And that's where that trailer, that park sits now with that Hispanic community on it. But that's just a little known fact. And track number 20, and Ms. Baines, we kind of hooked up last week when I referenced the fact that y'all were still, Shiloh was still pretty much more intact than most neighborhoods and was still a legacy Black neighborhood. And Oakley is also contained in that. Keep in mind that these opportunity zones, these federal overlay zones, provide capital gains tax abatements to mostly majority owned mega corporations. So that's another conversation when we talk about community benefits agreements that y'all probably need to get organized too when some folks come in here to develop. But I just wanted to let you know that this is the way that we proposed it because we were not organized along districts yet. They had not been designated by the city council. The city kind of went for it because they saw where, most African Americans that live in the city of Asheville, if they're clustered together, can be found in these 5 tracts. So next slide, please.
Ms. Williams,
Yes.
before you leave this slide, if there was a track 21 or a track doesn't exist right now, what happened to the track that would border from Biltmore Avenue coming up Charlotte Street toward College Street and onward to Macon Avenue, which was then known as the North Side?
Yes.
Had a predominantly Black community, and it's now predominantly majority.
That's the kicker. We weren't able to keep our neighborhoods intact. And these opportunity zones don't historically go back. They only take into consideration the demographics of a neighborhood. Those neighborhoods have been totally gentrified. Now, I moved to North Side when I was about 15. And let me tell you, almost none of the people that I grew up with have homes over there now, like Madison Avenue and Crescent Street. None of them. I mean, you can count them on one hand. And there was a bustling, even Floyd McKissick, the great Floyd McKissick, who was the originator of Soul City. And I don't know, y'all Google it if you don't know about it. But he grew up, I mean, he had a home on the North Side that his family built. That's where he came from, was Madison Avenue. So that street, all those neighborhoods are totally gentrified. And so when we looked at the demographics, they had become gentrified to the point that they were mostly majority white. And so they didn't even qualify income-wise either for opportunity zones, because there were certain rubrics for opportunity zones where they have to be qualified. Now, a certain part of Biltmore Avenue is still in that overlay area. You'll note. And there were Black people that did live on Biltmore Avenue, I do remember, but they're all gone. And Brooklet Street, I had cousins and stuff over there, so I kind of knew that neighborhood, but that's all gone. It's medical now. And, the property was acquired through urban renewal, and mostly doctors and lawyers and, other big outfits. So to answer your question, Mr. Oliphant, those places have been gentrified and the demographics changed to where they weren't even considered remotely distressed to qualify for an opportunity zone. And of course, not disproportionately minority either, and no high unemployment, but these areas still do. And this is why we picked them out, because we wanted mostly folks who had been excluded. And these points, when you're Black, when you are unemployed, when you have disproportionate rates of poverty, all of that makes you more marginalized and less inclined to be able to participate in anything that looks like a democratic process. Number one, we've been left out so long. That's another thing about community engagement. Once you leave people out for so long, everybody sort of becomes numb. And then the more you leave people out, they just go ahead and accommodate you and just stay out. So we've got some what we call repatriation to do. And I hate to use that word, because when we talk about repatriation, it means you're almost talking to people who are not citizens or who are foreigners. And that's not how we should be. Not at all. But thank you for that question. Any other questions, please?
Just before you leave that, please add the East End Valley Street area, which would be north of what is now Charlotte Street.
Yes.
So that's two major areas that have been completely overlooked in this zoning area.
East End is in there. I believe East End is considered part of track number 7, and I should have put East End in there. I do apologize, but yes, it is very much a part.
Yeah, I'm just not seeing it. Okay.
It's not delineated like the others are, and I do apologize, but yes, East End is very much a part of that. And East End, oddly enough, also goes up to the mountain. I didn't even understand that, but they pushed the track further north up to almost going up to the mountain from East End.
Okay, the mountain and the town.
Yeah, well, some parts of it, but
Yeah.
East End is certainly the locus of that.
Dee, can you, this is Miss Margaret from Burton Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about how come we were not, I think people don't realize, as you say, gentrification, how is it that why we weren't part of this track?
I think probably what has happened is because of the expressway. I hate to say this, but that
I want you to go ahead.
expressway, if it wasn't urban renewal, it was the expressway killing our communities out. I hate to say that. And the reason why I know it is because I lived in front of that expressway when it came over on Budgetary Street. You remember? I don't know if you even remember Budgetary Street that ran.
Oh, I do.
Okay, ran right in front of Hill Street Church.
Yeah, I grew up on Hill Street.
See, then.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when they put that crosstown expressway there, that disconnected Burton Street. And basically, Burton Street has been so gentrified too. I hate to say it, income.
No, true.
That's why. But one of the things we asked City Council was when we were thinking about Burton Street, and I needed to. I'm glad you asked. Is can y'all go ahead and add Burton Street in? I'm not trying. This is what we ask them because we realize that some of the neighborhoods have been cut off by expressways and other things like that, and have been excluded. And they kind of said pretty much yes. Because everybody knows what has happened and how we've been separated and neighborhoods been destroyed. So yes, that did come up, Miss Margaret, it did.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Burton Street was also ripped apart with Patton Avenue, which was
Yeah.
an extension of the expressway.
Oh, I'm telling you, it's very, just to talk about it, it is a very painful thing.
Right.
And
right. We are right in the middle of mitigations and strategies for this current DOT expansion, which they felt they could come back through our community a third time.
No, they can't come back a third time. If fool you 3 times, shame on you.
I'm just saying that's why we have the mitigation. Remember, well, I won't say I spoke with you last year. That
Yes.
was concern. They were going to take 32 houses, and because of the pushback from the DOT and from the community, as you say, community have to come together, but we have to come together and stay together through the duration of this process. They cut that down into, I think it's now maybe 12 houses. And we're still trying to see if we can't take that down any further.
Well, you can, because there's a federal law, what we call environmental racism, that when you put a major highway, I'm still certified through the NCDOT as a contractor. Anytime you come to a neighborhood and an NCDO project impacts it, and it is low income, minority, and or both, there are laws that the Federal Highway Administration has that deal with environmental racism, where there are strategies that can be used to mitigate, even buying them additional land where they can relocate and co-locate together and build another community. So there's a lot. If y'all haven't explored that piece of legislation, you certainly do need to, and it's very timely. You really do need to, because there are other mitigation strategies that can be used. Everything from acquiring other land to and co-locating together to form another neighborhood, to acquiring other real estate or other property, to putting greenways that and buffers that will buffer out the effects of that freeway.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the next site that's going to be addressed for environmental racism, and it may be more, unless they're prepared, is Hillcrest Apartments, and that seat of Express.
Right.
The community needs to be getting together and work. Well, anyway, I guess I shouldn't.
No, we won't. Well, I just wanted you to bring that out because by the time the piece that you mentioned, because we had so much gentrification, all the infills of empty land was so purchased so quickly that if people wanted to relocate and stay in this community, the infills have been purchased and are being built on monthly.
Yes, ma'am. I saw that. One of the things that we need to also talk about is land use planning in the city. Land use planning is tantamount to the police power that the municipality has. One of the things that we were able to do in our community work with the company is that we use data to convince the city to put a moratorium on utilizing any more, selling any more urban renewal land. There are 2 parcels that were already in negotiations 3 or 4 years ago. And of course, from a business standpoint and a contractual standpoint, we had no standing, but we got the city to put a moratorium on the other lot. So that's another thing that we need to be very watchful and mindful of.
Thank you, Dee, for lifting that up. I wanted to switch over to the chat really quick and lift up some of the things that came through while you were talking. Grant lifted up, he asked the city of Asheville about the opportunity zones in 2019, and it seemed like there was some mystery around them and what the direction was. I got that there was a developer tax breaks, I believe, as you state. These opportunity zones are something else that should be clear, like the Southside Innovation District. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that or clarify, Grant, or would you like Dee to respond specifically to you lifting that up?
I mean, that's pretty much, I can't recall what it's Paul D'Angelo I talked to, and I looked it up. I looked up what these opportunity zones, I can't even remember if it's a nonprofit that is that advocated for these opportunity zones. It doesn't seem like something that the grassroots really defined to me a little bit, is what I'm saying, kind of, that it didn't seem like, it's federal, but it seems like somebody lobbied for creating the legislation for these opportunity zones. They're around the country. And then did anything opportunity zone-ish happen in the past several years since they came into being? It's something that seems like it needs a lot more definition, and cities, and just like this engagement process, people need to define our Asheville version of an opportunity zone, I think.
Thank you
Yes.
for listening. Go ahead, Dee.
Yeah, those are great points. Grant, I just wanted to say that Senator Tim Scott and Senator Cory Booker were the two federal proponents of opportunity zones. Let me say, here in Asheville, because of just a lot of things, it looks like the community has not been able to come together to do what other communities have done. The city council has pretty much been a proponent of what we call community benefits agreements. We put forth some position papers and data that got the city council to start advocating for community benefits agreements. Those are the things that the community puts forward for any opportunity zone or enterprise zone, any federally designated zone. Community always should be organized and always should be the proponent for, okay, you got a tax credit or you got a capital gains tax abatement. So now what do we get? And it's not just city council, but city council has assumed that role simply because the citizens and in our neighborhoods have not evolved into the type of advocates that they need to be. In other cities, like when they built the arena for the LA Lakers, that was one of the most powerful community benefits agreements I've ever seen. When in fact, the city manager here in Asheville had the consultants here to talk about hoteliers and how to extract and exact more funds from the Tourism Development Authority. One of the things that we put forward was community benefits agreements. Now, the only thing about that is the city council is not the most effective proponent of it because they can be sued because you can't wear two hats at one time. And they were sued by a hotelier. I believe Mr. Patel sued them because they had the zoning says that if the project meets the criteria, then it should go. But the thing about it is that the city council tried to negotiate after the fact, and it should have been citizens who were negotiating. And that hotel was in the West End Clingman neighborhood. It is on Haywood Street, right there where the old sheriff's department was. But the community is just not geared up. The only thing that most of the neighborhood groups is usually after the fact, and it's usually a development that they don't want to see coming in, and it's a lot after the fact. But there's a lot to be learned by being an advocate before things happen early on, and then being a negotiator, so that when you sit down, you're sitting down with the hotel. You're not necessarily Paul D'Angelo is, but the citizens are. And that's how you can be effective that way.
Ms. Williams, also to mention what you've already added, painfully missing from the discussion that's going on right now is the preservation and restoration of historic facilities such as Nazareth Church, St. James Church, St. Matthias, Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church. All those are historic facilities that were built by Jane Bessie Miller, who we mentioned earlier, that owns Emma. And we also didn't talk about Violet Hill Cemetery, which was one of the segregated cemeteries, and it's still segregated just about. And those are key landmarks and facilities that need to be mentioned during this opportunity zone discussion.
Well, they can be, but the thing about it is you have to be ready. When you talk about preserving these buildings, these churches and other significant landmarks, one of the things that some of us who know how to do such things is have these buildings put on the National Register of Historic Places, okay?
All right.
Several of them are, but most of them are not. And that is something that we have to undertake to do ourselves. When you start talking about the significance of having these buildings preserved, you start talking about having to have funds in case they begin deterioration as well. And there are a number of foundations who will, if a building is on the National Register, especially if it has programs, will inject program-related investments into that. Now, the Dogwood Health Trust does have a facet of program-related investment, and theoretically for historically designated structures. The thing of it is that I have not been able to get into the nitty-gritty with them on that. I did have a meeting with their housing investment impact vice president, Sarah Grimes, and we did talk about program-related investments, but it was for a client that I had that was going to build permanently affordable housing. But the literature that they have says that, yes, they will invest in a program-related investment. Now, when you start talking about a program-related investment, we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but we do need to know what's out here. We're talking about perhaps a loan that's got patient money or an investment that's low interest or whatever. But these conversations are the ones that need to happen when we're planning, say, 100 years from now. And that's something that we haven't been doing as a community, is planning to preserve these things. And so I haven't heard anybody talk about what happens to all of our churches, which are historic structures, when most of the structures, even the ones that white people pretty much control here in Asheville, like the Masonic Hall, it is on the National Register of Historic Places. The Episcopalian Church is on the National Register of Historic Places. I don't know if Hopkins Chapel is. That's another one of Mr. Miller's buildings. Is Mount Zion on the Historic Register, National Register? Pardon me? It should have been. All of those are James Miller's churches. All of them exemplary, historical, absolutely. And so we have not come together as a community. There are those of us like myself, and I'm just one. I guess I'm probably one of the last ones living who ran with the Johnny Baxters of the world. You know, the historians who got grants from the historic resources, not the historic resources, but the National Humanities Council and the North Carolina Humanities Council. Now, this cemetery up the street here, the South Asheville Colored Cemetery, we were engaged to do a preliminary history of it to prove its significance so that it could be preserved. There's a lot of, I don't want to get into the specifics, but we don't do enough planning, and we always are, after the fact. So these are some of the things that we need to, as a community, start organizing around, is what we want to keep and what we want to preserve.
Ms. Williams?
That you mentioned the cemeteries, because Violent Hill is rapidly approaching Memorial Day, and we all are approaching Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
Violent Hill was one of the few cemeteries that would accept Black veterans.
Oh, yeah.
Minority veterans.
Yes.
Before they were allowed to go out to Western Carolina Military Cemetery.
Do you know why that is?
Let's talk about it. Go ahead.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fact that the South Asheville Cemetery was one of the first and the largest Black cemeteries, public cemeteries in this part of the state, and I believe was the largest. Now, when we walked it over before this development came up here, we physically counted over 5,000 graves up there. That's a lot of people. I mean, some of the graves, we had itineraries from Hart, and he had House of Thompson and Hennessy, and oh my goodness, Jesse Ray. And we literally saw where folks had been buried on top of folks during the flu epidemic in 1910. So this was a public colored cemetery. This cemetery, a lot of people don't know that. They think because that church is up there, that it's private, but it was not. Now, we were fortunate. We turned over black and white, hundreds of black and white photographs to Berea College, and the North Carolina collection at the library has some of them too, where there's an obelisk there that is a replica of the Vance Monument that the Rutherfords put on the grave, the Rutherfords from Shiloh. And I think it was about 8 foot tall, which is a large monument for a small cemetery like that, a private cemetery. I'm not private, but just the Rutherford family. And of course, J.V. Miller's colored brothers are buried in that cemetery. There were 4 or 5 of them. And they had a family plot, but then that's in the North Carolina collection. Y'all are welcome to go read about it. It's there. But these are the kinds of things that we need to discuss and act upon and preserve.
Not only did you mention his colored brothers, and at the time, he was actually colored himself. And that in itself brings up another part of the historical value of tracking the significant accomplishments and contributions that he made.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Mr. Miller was a philanthropist as well. And I had the high honor of interviewing his daughter when she was 100. I think she was 102. She was very cogent, even as old as she was. And that interview and the transcription is in the North Carolina collection of Pack Memorial Library.
Wow. This is amazing. I just want to first say thank you, Dee.
Pleasure.
What a plethora of information and historical value that you bring to the engagement process. I believe Grant said in chat that it's not easy to track all this. It can easily overwhelm anyone. Totally agree, Grant. And I want to also amplify that Rob wanted to thank you for raising the content you shared around Johnny Baxter. He said that was his grandfather's brother.
Yeah. Mr. Baxter was quite a gentleman. Mr. Baxter was one of the most avid and celebrated Black historians in Western North Carolina. Believe you me.
Wow. I wanted to open the floor. Dee's last slide was around any questions that you all have, circling around about the participatory budget process that she proposed, where things are. I want to open the floor. Were there any aha moments, any light bulbs or questions that came up learning about community engagement in the form of participatory budget process? Dee did such an incredible job. If there's other questions, I want to give some space to that.
Okay. I'm sorry, Miss Ebony. May I have a chance to respond to something Miss Williams said?
Yes.
One of the things that she is, again, 100% correct about is the fact that when we talk about engagement, we need to be prepared. My formerly enslaved ancestors built the Thomas Chapel AME Zion Church in Black Mountain. We now wrote and got it on the National Historic Register, but I'm also a grant writer, but it took different people pulling together for us to get it on the register. And many of my formerly enslaved ancestors are buried in that cemetery around that little AME church, which is often credited with being one of the mother churches of other AME churches in the area. We have got to, it is possible, because one of the things that happens when you get national preservation status is it makes it impossible for developers and other entities to ruin that land. So to reiterate that, we have got to figure out, when we talk about engagement, how do you write those proposals to the feds? How do you get a multicultural coalition to back it and get that application and approval process across the finish line? Since that has happened with that little church, we have been able to get Dogwood Health Trust money from equity funds and other funders to help with the continued preservation of that site. So I want to echo the fact that it is possible and challenge us when we have these kind of historic sites around Buncombe County, that when we talk about engagement, we need to be ready for the long haul. It may not be 1 or 2 years, it may take 5 or 6 or 7 years, but if you're consistently behind it, that will happen. And now that little church in the middle of that little cemetery is preserved indefinitely for the future. And that's something my family is excited about.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Powerful. Thank you for amplifying what your experience has been like, because you give reflection to what's possible, so that as we do want to pursue those opportunities to preserve historical landmarks, you all know in the community who you can go to that can help support you walking through that. So if the application looks overwhelming, you have community allies that you can check in with that can help support that pursuit or give you connections to those that can help you so that we can make that opportunity successful. Dee, is there anything else you wanted to lift up in relation to next steps or opportunities to further or re-engage on the participatory budget process?
I think it would be a great thing, you know, as I saw the city staff at our last equity budget sessions in the meeting. I think you know, these relationships are going to have to be developed, you know, and even if you start talking about much larger sums of money, one of the things that we need to do is start where we are with what we have. You know, everything is hypothetical until you do something. Mm-hmm. So this participatory budgeting process needs to happen, even if you don't have but $50,000 per community to start off with, and ask for a match from Dogwood Health Trust. They'll do it, you know, but we've got to be the impetus. So I would hope that as you go forward with trying to reorganize the city's budget into reinvestment around the African-American community, that you start right here with what you have and then expand on it, because it is something that you can do immediately. It is something where you can get recognized on a state and national level for. And it will also involve our young people, very young people. This is one thing that really excited me. When you can bring a kid in 10 or 12 years old at the very ground level and show them how government really works, and they can even have a say and then participate, that's very powerful. And our children need to be brought in at earlier ages too, to know that they do have a voice and that they should participate. This is the way that they learn. So that's all that I would say. I would say that we are here. My role is not so much in leading initiatives. My role is to provide information, to do a skills transfer to ordinary folks, because I'm not vain enough to think that I can speak for folks. You know, I think people who are most impacted by something should be the spokespeople for that. And so we're happy to do whatever we can. If we need to reconvene or introduce you or whatever, that's fine, you know, but it needs to be carried forward and it needs to happen. And then what that does is open the door to the bigger money. You know, let me just say, nobody's going to trust you with a lot of money until you show them that you're ready. And those relationships have to be built as well, too. So I think it's a very good jumping off point.
Absolutely agree. Thank you so much, Dee, for amplifying this work that you're doing. It sounded like there were some opportunities to re-engage the city council around them creating a resolution that could introduce this process. Was that clear from what you said?
Yes, it is. I think it's been such a long time with the pandemic. You know, it was like 3 months later, the pandemic struck. They were very enthused about it. And they were on the verge of getting the consultants to come and advise them how to start and next steps. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that needs to be done is probably a refresher and, you know, having them talk and discuss, get the consultant, I guess, and then talk about passing the resolution and then go from there, because hopefully we can do it next budget. And this is a time now to plan for the budget that's upcoming. Not only this is not to say that anything folks want in the new budget is excluded, but at least neighborhoods, especially those who look like us, represented by people like us, can have projects that they would want done, capital projects in those neighborhoods. And then, you know, still go on with reinvestment, community reinvestment, as far as reimagining public safety and diverting those funds.
Thank you for lifting that up. Grant, I see you have your hand raised. You have the floor.
Yeah, just real fast that I heard about participatory budgeting like 20 years ago and hadn't heard much about it until I get it was you and Keith Young and others, Dee, the fact that Greensboro and Durham have been doing it for the past few years needs to be, I'm sure it's been highlighted already, but it needs to be like in the top quarter of the press releases and the text and the first couple of slides to help people grasp that this is something that's been going on in North Carolina municipalities already.
Very good.
Thank you for lifting that up, Grant. Mr. Bernard, you have the floor.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Deanna and Dee were just talking about and where we are in the current budget process. And I think we're right in the middle of it. And I always have problems kicking things down the road. Tomorrow is not promised. And so I like to look sometimes at how do we inject energy and strategy in the current process to reach out to the things that we want to say, prepare for next year's budget. Particularly on my mind right now, I'm thinking about restoration and rehabilitation of existing facilities that are historical monuments and historical facilities that can be utilized for outreach programs in the current community and that have a long-reaching effect on who's still in the current community.
Mr. Bernard, like Ms. D and others here tonight have talked about, it's hard to go against the public if we show up in numbers at meetings. One of the projects I was working with, an African-American school in Durham, where we got a $6 million bond referendum. And when we had 200 to 300 alum from that old school that had been shut down that appeared at those city council meetings and those county commissioner meetings, they had to listen. So the question, and I guess Ms. Williams talked about this, and Rob, to some extent, is how do we engage just everyday people to feel empowered to attend these meetings in mass, not just one or two people, but sometimes 50 to 100. And once you get that kind of momentum running, then it's hard for people to ignore the group of people that are in large numbers in these spaces. So some of this is about, yes, how do we engage and empower just an everyday person to feel committed to this, for us working together via consensus, working through whatever disagreements we might have had to come together for the greater good of the community. And so that's the bigger question I'm asking tonight, is how do we make that happen?
I want to acknowledge Rob, come on. Sounds like he may have a response, and then we'll go to Mr. Bernard after that.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that, Miss Dion Greenlee. I would say that is the sole focus and sum total of my priorities right now, and are organizing with a massive amount of specifically all Black community partners to do just that exact thing what you're talking about, to where every Black voice is listened to, and we don't have these people that are representing us, and that to redistribute the power back to the community members what Ms. D. Williams said, empowering individuals to speak for themselves. And also what Ms. D. Williams said about once you disenfranchise a community for so long, they keep themselves disenfranchised. Like they don't show up. So how do you repatriate individuals? And I'm out in community 3 days a week, building this, what it is that we're working on. Not just me, many other Black people as well, to where we are starting out the most vulnerable and most impacted. And we do many different methods of outreach. So you've got the in-person, you've got the social media, you've got the Zoom meeting platforms, and like you just got to do a massive amount of outreach and get everybody up to speed on what's going on, and then show them that they actually have the power to make a difference. Because most of these community members kind of just look at what's going on and don't realize that they have the power to influence or change anything. And you know, that's what we did and utilized to get a change in decision with the Haywood Street congregation deal, and plenty of other things such as the moratorium on urban renewal land and a lot of other things. But yeah, that is exactly what the sole focus of not only my organization, but I would like say between 10 and 20 additional Black organizations, is not only how we do that, but how do we cultivate and groom our next city officials to come in and take place and fund that operation to get them elected. So it's multifaceted, but we are starting to come together. And you're right, once we reach a critical mass and show up, it's going to be hard to turn us down.
Thank you for lifting that up, Rob. I certainly appreciate your input. Mr. Bernard?
I always appreciate the power of Mr. Thompson's words. And to add to what he and Ms. Jones just said, along with what Ms. D has emphasized, and Grant also mentioned it, when we talk about engagement, empowerment, encouragement, and motivation of the masses, we're talking about creating a movement that must be exemplified and perpetuated rather than being a one-time or a spur-of-the-moment shot. It's got to have momentum, and that momentum has to grow. And it has to grow in the minds and the hearts of people, because, as you said, once they are placed in a point where they become, it's like the laws of inertia. Things that are in motion tend to stay in motion, and things that are still tend to stay still. But if you can get them moving just a little bit, you have to keep that movement going, and that inertia will eventually pick up power like the snowball rolling down a hill and grow.
I love that. Yes, Mr. Bernard, you are hitting home. There has to be a level of opportunity for consistency, not just more so project based. And if there be anything that I would hope that we can, like our take home message, is this opportunity that when the community is leading it, it has a difference in the weight of the pressure for a timed existence. If we allow the municipality or an organization to just drive the work, then they create the guardrails, they create the parameters, they create the time sensitivity, which is usually based on something bigger than them, a grant process, a open window for funding, or a set selected window for engagement. So I think with what you lifted up, Mr. Bernard, this is an opportunity, like what we've been doing here in the Academy, in building up how we are relating to one another, looking at different community engagement frameworks, what's worked in other communities, what have you seen work in your own community? You heard an example tonight. All of these build up the momentum that you as Academy participants have the opportunity to continue this meaningful engagement and keep this train going. Right now, if this momentum is based on the the budget engagement process, then this is done next week, but you all's collective power to keep mobilizing or organizing around, if the participatory budget engagement is something you all want to consider or lift up, then the next round of budget engagement is happening. It's going to continue going beyond this deadline in May. So keep that in mind if this is something you all want to see manifest or re-engage, especially as you have an opportunity to bring the attention to the city council about re-engagement, is how can we collectively come behind that and get behind that as a community and say, this is what we want, this is what we want to do. That gives you all access to what they've already committed to, the resources, having someone from Greensboro come in, work on a more consistent, longer term basis and keep this momentum going, as well as seeing and identifying ways that you all could be amplifying the connections and communication amongst one another and between each other to show support and solidarity to any existing projects that you all may be working on. Um, I wanted to lift up what was going on in chat. Miss Greenlee Jones says we're talking about a movement of engagement, which if nurtured properly will grow. Thank you, Mr. Bernard. Thank you all for the work that you have helped us with. Miss Greenlee Jones, I do not know where you would be without your expertise. Rob shared. Oh, that is so cool. Rob, the feeling is mutual. As MLK stated, we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. We should all continue to support one another. What a powerful statement to yield to tonight. Thank you for saying that. I want to honestly be considerate of you all's time, but I also want to give a moment for us to allow for Ty or Kelsey to share before we wrap our session for tonight. Would you all like to share any reflections or thoughts or things that resonated with you in our time together tonight?
I would just like to uh, thank Ms. Williams for the information that she shared with us. She's always very insightful, has a lot of information, a lot of data, and I appreciate your presence here tonight.
Thank you, Rob. It's always a pleasure. It's I've done a lot here, but there's a lot of work and a lot of younger people behind me. Let me just say that there's a lot of work to be done, and certainly I'm not, there's a lot to be done, but there's a lot of people who need to be impacted and reached too. That's the only thing that's really missing. And so I would say to you, just as I work with these more than 100 Black preachers, and by the way, full disclosure, Darwood Health Trust has issued me a contract to help them get organized as a 501c3, and looks like they're going to be investing in some permanently affordable housing for them and some Black business development, technical assistance components. So by my saying that is to say that there's a lot of people out here doing a lot of stuff, but like I tell them all the time, if it's not the least of these that y'all are impacting, then all of this is in vain. Power is in the people, and people know when you love them. And that's what I tell them each and every time. It's not for the churches that this work is being done. It is for the people.
Amazing. Thank you, Dee, for lifting that up and amplifying it. Thank you, Ty, for sharing. You learned a lot. Thank you, Kelsey, for saying this is great. I am going to yield our time for tonight. Our bright spot next week is going to be none other than Rob Thomas. He is going to close out our Community Engagement Academy, sharing some of he and his group, what they've been working on and other ways that we can get involved. So thank you all so much for your time tonight, your commitment to the Academy, and we're looking forward to maintaining, building, and developing relationship meaningfully as we close out the Academy and go back into our real worlds of what we were doing already. We want to make sure that we can continue this engagement and make those connections inside this group, as well as identifying those of you that want to maybe meaningfully and intentionally build deeper relationships with the city of Asheville in ways around community engagement after the academy, and continue work that they're going to be doing, because they're not going to stop engaging community. And I want to make sure that you all have the space to be thought of and considered when they look at who to talk to in the community, so that the voices that you all hold space for can be amplified, and those that are missing, if you're connected to them, that you can bring them full-bodied into that continued engagement. Peace and blessings, everyone. It was so good to connect with you, and I can't wait to hear from you all next week. Have a good night.